So there goes my life, passing by with every exit sign. And it's been so long, sometimes I wonder how I will stay strong. No sleep tonight, I'll keep on driving these dark highway lines. And as the moon fades, one more night gone, only 20 more days. But I will see you again. I will see you again. A long time from now. And there goes my life, passing by with every departing flight. And it's been so hard, so much time, so far apart. She walks the night. How many hearts will die tonight? And when things have changed, I guess I'll find out in 17 days. But I will see you again. I will see you again. A long time from now. My body aches and it hurts to say, and no one is moving. And I wish that I weren't here tonight, but this is my life, and I will see you again. I will see you again. A long time
What a beautiful song. Hello, everyone. My name is Michelle Anstein, and I'm a Delawarean. I've lived in Delaware my entire life, and a part of my family has been here in Delaware for hundreds of years. My educational training is in history, so I'm going to be giving you a perspective on Delaware through our history after I give you a little bit of a geographical lesson about where Delaware is located. And hopefully this will help you to understand Delaware a little bit better. And I'll wrap up with some interesting facts about Delaware, which hopefully will give you, again, a little bit more of an understanding of what I think is a pretty fascinating state. So, in contrast to the introductory song, what I'd like to do now is play you a little bit of our state song to give you a little bit of a feeling for what Delaware is.
Oh, the hills of dear Newcastle and the smiling vales between, when the corn is all in tassel and the meadowlands are green, where the cattle crop the clover and its breath is in the air, while the sun is shining over our beloved Delaware. Oh, our Delaware, our beloved Delaware, for the sun is shining over our beloved Delaware. Oh, our Delaware, our beloved Delaware, here's the loyal son that pledges faith to good old Delaware, where the wheat fields break and billow in the peaceful land of Kent, where the toiler seeks his pillow with the blessings of content, where the bloom that tints the peaches cheeks of merry maidens share, and the woodland chorus preaches a rejoicing Delaware. Oh, our Delaware, our beloved Delaware, for the sun is shining over our beloved Delaware. Oh, our Delaware, our beloved Delaware, here's the loyal son that pledges faith to good old Delaware. Here's the loyal son that pledges faith to good old Delaware.
Well, the music that you just heard, as I said, is part of our state song, which was written over 100 years ago in 1906. So you get a sense of some of the history of the state overall, and also of the things that make each of our 3 counties in Delaware unique. And that in and of itself is somewhat unique for a US state. Delaware is the second smallest state of the 50. The only state that is smaller is Rhode Island. And as a consequence, we only have 3 counties, Newcastle, Kent, and Sussex. And each of the verses of our state song features one of those counties, with the last verse sort of tying the whole state together. And our state song talks a lot of patriotism because Delaware had a fairly important role from the beginning of the colonies here that became the United States. And I'll touch on that a little bit throughout my talk. I will tell you that I said that it was the second smallest state. Just to give you a sense of the size, it's 154.5 kilometers long and then 62.8 kilometers wide at its widest spot. So it's very easy for me. I live in the northern part of the state, and it's very easy for me within a couple of hours to get in my car and drive all the way to the southern part of the state. And it's very difficult for me, having lived in Delaware, to go to a big state like Texas. I always expect to be able to get somewhere very quickly or to get to another state very quickly. But life is a little bit different in Delaware because it is one of the small eastern states. And even though Delaware is so tiny, it has such a rich, diverse geography and also history that it's often said that Delaware is like a microcosm of the entire United States. So you get a lot packed into this one tiny little state. To give you a sense of the geography of Delaware, I did want to provide you with a couple of maps. First of all, on the right, you can see the entire continental United States. And I guess we do have Alaska and Hawaii, maybe not to scale completely, but you can see by the red circle where Delaware is located. So we are in the Mid-Atlantic. That is our collection of states, if you will, on the Atlantic Ocean. And on the left, when you zoom in on that circle, you can see that Delaware is bordered by Pennsylvania to our north, Maryland to our west and to our south. And then on the east, it's a little more complex. In the northern part of the state, it's the Delaware River that is our border. It empties into the Delaware Bay, which empties into the Atlantic Ocean. So all of those are considered, our border to the east. And then on the other side of the river and bay is New Jersey. So it is yet another state that is to the east as well. To give you a sense of sort of the makeup inside of that state of Delaware, the northern part of the state is largely the urban part of the state. It has our largest city of Wilmington, and it is more of a hilly area. We don't have mountains in Delaware, but the hills you're more likely to find in the northern part of the state. And then that's really only about a third, if that, of the state that is that sort of geography. And then in the southern 2/3 of the state, it's more of a fertile land that's flat and is where a lot of farming takes place. We also, because we are on the shore, have marshes in that area. So a lot of biodiversity based on that as well. And that part of the state is a little more rural, although things have really changed in our southernmost county of Sussex, right along the shoreline, because it is a really popular vacation destination. And so people from other parts of the state, from Maryland, from Washington, D.C., our U.S. capital, they can get to the Delaware beaches very easily. And so there are a lot more people who have either come to that part of the state to live full time or who come seasonally to be there during the summertime. One of the interesting facts about Delaware and its borders is, first of all, if you can see, the northern part of our state is rounded. We are the only US state to have an arc as one of our borders, and that marks the border between Delaware and Pennsylvania. And there's a very specific reason for that. And that is because in the late 1600s, the colony was owned by King Charles II of England, and his brother, the Duke of York, was given the land that is now Delaware. It was referred in its earlier days as the three lower counties on the Delaware, but the Duke of York was given that portion of land, and then eventually King Charles II of England gave the land north of Delaware, that's now Pennsylvania, to a man named William Penn, who came in 1682 to settle his part of the New World. And the Duke of York wanted to make sure that there was still a safe separation between the land that he owned, that is now present-day Delaware, and the land that William Penn was given by King Charles II, now Pennsylvania. And so his seat of government was a town called Newcastle, and he ordered a 12-mile circle to be drawn around that seat of government in Newcastle. And the northern part of that circle became the Arc, that is the northern part of Delaware. So it survived even after ownership of the Duke of York and William Penn in Pennsylvania, and it has become a very distinctive mark for the state of Delaware. We are also the only state, if you've heard of the Mason-Dixon line, that marks the split between states in the north part of the United States and states in the southern part of the United States, especially those original 13 colonies and then 13 states. We're the only state to be to the east of the Mason-Dixon line. So it's another way that makes Delaware a bit unique among its fellow states. So you might be wondering where the name Delaware comes from. Well, the name actually comes from an Englishman named Thomas West, who was the third, or he's also referred to as the 12th Baron Delaware. He was made governor of the Virginia colony to the south of us, and it was during an expedition that his lieutenant governor or deputy governor, whose name was Samuel Argall, he was trying to travel from Virginia to Bermuda, so both south of Delaware. And unfortunately, a storm came up. He was blown off course, blown north, and he actually found shelter behind and I want to make sure that I get this right, it's called the headland, which is what you're seeing on the left side of the diagram there, the headland of Cape Henlopen. And essentially his ship found shelter there. What I like about this particular image of that piece of land, that part of Delaware, is that you get to see how the land has changed over years. So that little hook almost that Samuel Argall would have found protection behind from the storm actually has changed in the way it looks over the years since 1610, when he sheltered there. He had discovered something new, and so he named that piece of land, the headland, after his governor of Virginia, calling it Delaware. And the bay that's nestled within that headland he also named the Delaware Bay. And the interesting thing about the way the name evolved over time, I think it was stated really well by a Delaware historian whose name was John Monroe. And he says the headland lost its name over time, but the bay retained it. And from the bay, the name traveled to the river that fed it, to the Indians on its shore, and to the state formed of the three lower counties, those three lower counties that I had mentioned before. So all from that tiny little piece of land that Samuel Argall sheltered behind, gradually the name traveled onto the water near it, to the people who were already living here, and eventually, when the United States were formed, to the state of Delaware, which I think is pretty interesting. Well, of course, as I've already mentioned, there were people who were living here before European settlers discovered the land, and they would have called themselves the Lenape, and yet the people who first encountered them referred to them as the Delaware because of the naming of this piece of land. And you can see from this map that the Lenape actually once inhabited a good portion of Delaware, so the coastal and northern part of Delaware, also eastern Pennsylvania, and New Jersey, basically the whole state. And of course, as European settlers started to make their way to this area, the Lenape, like many other native tribes, were pushed to the west. The interesting thing, as occurs in many other states along the East Coast, is that while a good number of the tribe actually went west, some stayed. And we still have descendants from that original Lenape tribe who are living here in Delaware. And some of them are members of a state-recognized tribe called the Lenape Indian Tribe of Delaware. Okay, well, I've mainly discussed the Lenape as our very first residents of Delaware and the English, but the truth is that before the English actually made a settlement here in the state of Delaware, there were Dutch and there were also Swedish who had made settlements on Delaware. And it all started with a settlement in what is now a coastal town in the southern part of Delaware called Lewis, Delaware. The Dutch came in 1609 and they settled the area. You know, settled is a strong word maybe to use, but they came, they embarked, they traded with the indigenous people who were here. They built a house and a palisade. And while a good number of the folks who came on a ship called the Whale and landed here in Delaware and started to build a settlement, which they called Swanendale, which means Valley of the Swans in Swedish, while a good number actually went back with traded supplies to Europe, there were a number of men, a small number, let's see if I get it correct, 28, who actually stayed here in Delaware and waited for another ship to come with more people and more supplies. Now, while that ship and all of the people who were going to come in it were getting ready to sail back to Delaware, there was unfortunately what was referred to as a massacre. So a killing that wiped out basically all of those 28 men who were actually staying here in Delaware. So when the next commander came, and his name was Peterson de Vries of Horn. When he came over with the ship and landed here, he actually documented his experience. He wanted to find out what had happened that had led to the killing of all of the 28 men who were left here. So I actually have an excerpt of his history of his travels and coming to this settlement of Swannondale. And I want to read a little bit to you. It's the 8th of December, 1632. And he says, "We sailed into the river before our destroyed house, well on our guard. The Indians came to the edge of the shore near the yacht, but dared not come in. At length, one ventured to come aboard the yacht, whom we presented with a cloth dress and told him we desired to make peace. Then immediately more came running aboard, expecting to obtain a dress also, whom we presented with some trinkets and told the one to whom we had given the cloth garment that we had given it to him because he had most confidence in us, that he was the one who came in the yacht. And should they come the next day with their chief called Sikimus, we would then make a firm peace, which they called rencontant marinate. An Indian remained on board of the yacht at night, whom we asked why they had slain our people and how it happened. He then showed us the place where our people had set up a column to which was fastened a piece of tin, whereupon the arms of Holland were painted. One of their chiefs took this off for the purpose of making tobacco pipes, not knowing that he was doing amiss. Those in command at the house made much ado about it, and the Indians, not knowing how it was, they went away and slew the chief who had done it and brought a token of the dead to the house to those in command, who told them they wished they had not done it, that they should have brought him to them, as they wished to have forbidden him to do the like again. They then went away, and the friends of the murdered chief incited their friends, as they are people like the Italians who are very revengeful, to set about the work of vengeance, observing our people out of the house, each one at his work, that there was not more than one inside who was sick, and a large mastiff who was chained. Had he been loose, they would never have dared to approach the house. And the man who had command, so that's 2 men and a dog who's chained. And the man was standing near the house. And then 3 of the bravest Indians who were to do the deed, bringing a lot of beaver skins with them to exchange, asked to enter the house. The man in charge went in with them to make the barter. When being done, he went down from the loft where the stores lay, and in descending the stairs, one of the Indians seized an axe and cleft the head of our agent, who was in charge, so that he fell down dead. They also relieved the sick man of life and shot into the dog, who was chained fast and whom they most feared, 25 arrows before they could dispatch him. They then proceeded towards the rest of the men who were at their work, and going among them with pretensions of friendship, struck them down. Thus was our young colony destroyed, causing us serious loss. So obviously this history is written from the point of view of Peter de Vries, but it does, I think, depict the difference in culture of the Europeans and the indigenous peoples. And so what seems to have been a misunderstanding in the way to, sort of treat someone else's belongings, and then how to make recompense, actually turned into a very serious incident where the men were killed and the Swannondale colony settlement did not actually survive. So what happened then? We're not done yet with the Dutch, but when we think about other important dates in Delaware history, at this point, others entered the scene. In 1638, Peter Minuit led Swedish settlers to establish Fort Christina, which is now the modern city of Wilmington that I mentioned earlier. And that actually became the first European settlement in Delaware. Unfortunately, when the Swedes settled there, which is in the northern part of the state on the Delaware River, the Dutch, who felt like they had a claim to the land already, they settled south of the Swedes on the Delaware River and essentially cut off the waterway so that goods and trade couldn't happen. And they took over the Swedish fort of Christina and maintained control of that part of the state until the 1650s. And eventually in the 1660s, the English were able to defeat the Dutch holdings here. And what had been a Dutch fort in the city of Newcastle, which was called Fort Casimir, became what I just mentioned, the English naming of Newcastle. And so in the early years of the 1600s, into the mid 1600s, there was just a back and forth that was happening here between different European nations, with the English eventually taking hold in the mid 1600s. So fast forward about 100 years, and the date around which all of the talks on the 50 states that hopefully you're tuning into happened, 1776, a very monumental year in the United States. And the interesting thing for Delaware is that before July 4th, which is the official marking of the Declaration of Independence from Great Britain, Delaware actually declared its independence. And here's the interesting thing. It declared independence from England, but also from Pennsylvania, because eventually Delaware became part of the state of Pennsylvania under William Penn, whom I mentioned earlier. So it was quite a different cultural shift when William Penn took control of the 3 lower counties on the Delaware. And so the people who were living here were ready to assert themselves as a colony, and did so on June 15th of 1776. So I believe we were actually the first colony to declare independence. But keep in mind, again, both England and Pennsylvania, Delaware was really striking out at that time. And the interesting thing about that vote for Delaware is there were 3 delegates who attended the Continental Congress on behalf of Delaware. When a vote was taken, one of those Delawarean delegates voted for independence, one voted against. And the final delegate was very sick. He had cancer. He was at home in Delaware, and he made a very famous ride through thunder and rain to Philadelphia to cast the deciding vote on behalf of Delaware for independence. So Delaware eventually voted for independence, and all 3 of those delegates did sign the Declaration of Independence. So that's a unique little fact for Delaware. And then Delaware just loves being first in one way or another. So in 1787, Delaware actually became the first state when the United States Constitution was sent out for ratification on December 7th, 1787. The Delaware colony was the first state to ratify the Constitution. And of course, the Constitution for the United States is our supreme document that provides our laws. It sets up our three branches of government: judicial, legislative, and executive, gives checks and balances for those three parts of government, and also outlines certain rights of its citizens. So it was very monumental, and Delawareans are still proud to this day of being the first state. When we get beyond the 1700s, in the 1800s, Delaware really grappled with the presence of slavery. And one of the things that is interesting about Delaware is that it didn't have many plantations on the one hand, so it didn't align completely with southern states that had plantations. On the other hand, it had some industries throughout the state, especially on the waterways, but more in the northern part of the state. But it wasn't, industrial at the level of northern states. So it was sort of in the middle. And for that reason, it became one of 5 states that were border states. And so what this meant was during the United States Civil War in the 1860s, Delawareans, the troops that they raised here in Delaware fought on the side of the Union or the North against slavery. But when President Abraham Lincoln issued the Emancipation Proclamation before the war was over, it did not include emancipating slaves who were in the state of Delaware or the other border states. It was just states that were at war with the Union. So slavery was not outlawed in Delaware until after the Civil War, which makes it somewhat unique as well. Delaware was also, you probably have heard of the Underground Railroad. And so Delaware was a pass-through for the Underground Railroad, and people like Thomas Garrett, who was active here in Delaware, and Harriet Tubman, who was really active up and down the East Coast, took it, in hand to really bring enslaved people to freedom in the North, in the northern states, and all the way up into Canada, which is pretty amazing, the work that they did. Now, one of the big things that was also happening during the 19th century is the formation of a company called DuPont. And it happened with a man named Eleuthère Irene DuPont, who traveled with his brother Victor and his father Pierre from France during the French Revolution and came to the United States in about 1800 and built a business here in Delaware on the Brandywine River, and the business was making gunpowder. Gunpowder was important for hunting in the early states, but it was also important for military battles. And so the company provided gunpowder to the Union side during the Civil War, the US Civil War. And it also provided gunpowder for other purposes. By the 1900s, the DuPont family still owned or had, kind of most of the share of the DuPont company. And they started to innovate with a lot of different chemical products. And you can see on the list on the screen, there are a lot of chemical products that were initially created by chemists at DuPont. And so it became the biggest industry within Delaware and the biggest employer, definitely at the beginning of the 1900s, the 20th century, up to, sort of the mid to late part of the state. So into the mid 20th century, like I said, DuPont was still a family business. And because these family members were earning a lot of money, they were also Delaware philanthropists, and they helped to create things like a north-south highway to unify the state and to help products get from one end of the state to the other, especially when agriculture was mainly in the South. And they also created schools in Delaware, but those schools were segregated by race. So Black people went to one school and white people went to another. And because of this separation, there were folks who weren't getting a good quality education. And in the 1950s, court cases were brought from 4 different US states and the District of Columbia, Washington, D.C., to challenge this idea of separate but equal, which had been created in the 19th century, in the 1800s. And they brought a variety of cases. Delaware was one of the states where 2 cases went to the Supreme Court. And the interesting thing about Delaware is that within the state, when those cases were brought that said segregation is not giving equal education to Black students, the judge in Delaware actually ruled in favor of integration. So in favor of creating an integrated school where all students would have the same opportunities. It was the only state where that was the case. Because all of those court cases went to the Supreme Court in 1954, there was a ruling called Brown versus Board of Education, and that ruled for integration across the United States, which took a little bit of time, and it also caused a lot of trouble over time because not everybody wanted to integrate schools, and so it created unrest, and it also created a lot of private schools in the state of Delaware. Okay. Well, Delaware's history progresses into the late 19th century, and it began to move away from the chemical giant of DuPont, and instead it turned to incorporations. And basically what this means is that a lot of different nationwide companies, probably global companies too, and also a lot of banks within the United States are all incorporated here in the state of Delaware because our incorporation law is much easier for them to incorporate. So the interesting thing is that although they incorporate here, so the business is kind of formed here, most of them don't actually have employees here. They might have an address here, but it's not creating a lot of jobs for people within Delaware. But it is one of the distinctions. And because of all of these companies being incorporated here in Delaware, special laws had to be created. And those laws are, sort of the law of not only the land in the United States, but also globally. So it's pretty interesting how a little state like Delaware has contributed these laws about business to the entire world. They really do affect the entire world. The image that you see here is from a movie from the 1990s, I think the late 1990s, called Fight Club. Some of you might know about that. And it actually was a movie in which the main character really went to battle with corporations and credit card companies. And the scene that you're seeing here happens before a very, let's say, explosive moment. And really, it's interesting because the film is based on a book. Both book and film are set in Delaware. And if you're Delawarean and you watch the movie, you hear the names of Delaware towns, you see Delaware car license plates, you see a Delaware postal code on a business card of the main character. There really are a lot of Delaware references, but if you don't live in Delaware, you might not know them. So it's kind of an interesting insider sort of bit of information that I've shared with you now. And if you haven't seen the movie and have the opportunity to, you get a little bit of Delaware in that. There's an author named Hal Weitzman who in recent history wrote a book called What's the Matter with Delaware? And he sums up Delaware's history pretty succinctly and talks about Delaware as an exporting economy. He says, as a tiny state, Delaware has thrived as an exporting economy. In the 17th century, one of the state's top exports was tobacco. In the 18th century, wheat and lumber. In the 19th century, peaches. In the 20th century, chemicals. Nowadays, Delaware's main export is laws. And interestingly, Delaware is said to be home to more corporations than people, if you can believe it. Okay, so now you're experts in Delaware history. I just wanted to go over a few fun facts that you can think about when you're thinking of Delaware. It's some interesting things for you to know, starting with our state flag, which you saw earlier in the video. Delaware adopted our state flag on July 24th, 1913. The state seal is in the center of the flag. It's enclosed in a buff-colored diamond with a colonial blue background. Below the diamond is printed December 7th, 1787, the day that Delaware ratified the U.S. Constitution and became the first state. And interestingly, a lot of Delaware-based institutions use the colors, it's kind of like a dark blue and gold, to represent Delaware, even though you can see with this picture of the state flag, our colors are actually a light blue with a buff color. But if you see blue and gold, think of Delaware too. Okay, state bird, state flower, state tree. The state bird is the blue hen chicken, and that is because during the American Revolution, there were troops from Kent County, our middle county of Delaware, who had a special blue breed of chicken that they carried the roosters into battle with them. And they obviously fought battles. The roosters would also fight against one another, and both were said to be very, very fierce. So those Delaware soldiers were referred to as the Blue Hens chickens, and it eventually became our state bird. The peach blossom, our state flower, is because Delaware, believe it or not, was a major exporter of peaches during the 1800s. And unfortunately, it ended also in the 1800s because of a blight. And I'm going to forget the name of the blight, but I think it's called the yellows. Yes, the yellows that destroyed the peach crop, unfortunately. And then the state tree is the American holly. I actually have my little piece of holly here. The holly was very prominent here in Delaware. It is a very popular wintertime decoration used around the Christmas holiday. And Delaware has been a leading exporter of holly, believe it or not. So that is our state tree. The capital of Delaware is Dover, which is located in the middle of the state. As I said, Wilmington is our biggest city. It's in the northern part of the state. And within Dover is the Dover Air Force Base. This is our only military establishment. And the distinction for the Dover Air Force Base, and I want to make sure that I get this right, is that it is the sole entry point for fallen American service members returning to U.S. soil. So perhaps Not something nice to think about, but it does have, I believe, the biggest morgue in the United States. But this is where anyone who's fallen on foreign soil, any soldier, comes back to the Dover Air Force Base first. It is also the Air Force Base hosts the Department of Defense's largest air freight terminal. And you are seeing the back part of a C-5, I believe, which when I was growing up, we called Fat Alberts because they are enormous cargo planes. Okay. Despite being the first state, Delaware was the last state to get a national park. That's only been within the last 20 to 30 years. And our park is based on Delaware's history. It has locations throughout the state and really leans into the early Swedish and Dutch settlement I told you about, as well as Delaware being the first state. I talked a little bit about Delaware's shorelines. You know, a lot of people here in the US, they don't even know that Delaware is a state. And if they do know Delaware is a state, they think it's a place that doesn't have anything to do, really any place to go. We do have a lot of resort areas in our beaches. We also have a thriving arts community. And what you're seeing on this slide are a number of famous people and artworks from Delaware. Bob Marley, a famous reggae artist, spent time in Delaware when his mother moved here from Jamaica. Up in the upper left corner is Cab Calloway, a famous jazz musician who moved here a few years before his death and helped to create Delaware's only public high school for the arts. To the right of him is Aubrey Plaza, who is a TV actress and movie star who was born and raised in Delaware. Famous artworks include art of Howard Pyle, who is a Delaware artist and illustrator. And the Delaware Museum is actually has the biggest repository of pre-Raphaelite art in the whole United States. So it's a really small community, but has a lot of really important artworks and really leans into its arts here in Delaware. Well, I'm the executive director of Delaware Humanities. The work that we do with Delaware Humanities is all about bringing people together, people from different backgrounds, learning about one another, getting to know one another a little bit better. So it's really a pleasure to be here on this call today. This is exactly what we do as an organization. And so I really enjoyed the time today, and I think I have time for some questions, which I see are popping up. The first question asked is the state song a folk song, or do we know who wrote it? Actually, it is, it sounds, the instrumentals that were used sounds like banjo to me on this particular rendition. It has been presented in a lot of different ways. We know that a man named George Hinson, who came from the town of Milford in the southern part of the state, was responsible for writing most of the song. So it was, a response to him of the, sort of patriotism that he felt being a Delawarean. Okay, question 2. If I'm visiting Delaware for the first time, what do you recommend I see first? Oh my goodness, there's so much to see within the state of Delaware. I will say that the DuPont family not only was generous with creating schools and roadways, but also they had really amazing collections, world-class collections. So there are some great museums, Hagley Museum, which talks about the early DuPont company, Winter Museum, which has a repository of decorative arts. I mentioned the Delaware Art Museum. It was a DuPont family member who actually had the pre-Raphaelite collection that formed the early collection. Delaware beaches are a must too. Really, you can't go wrong any place in the state. What makes Delaware unique compared to the states around it? It's a really good question. And I think, you know, when it comes to the original 13 colonies, they were all very small. Wherever there is, you know, an adjacent boundary that's not sort of like a natural body of water that's cutting one state off from another, there's sort of a back and forth flow that happens. And so a lot of the things that we notice about Delaware are regional. So they might be similar in Maryland and also in Pennsylvania, New Jersey. But I would say that idea of being the first state is really pretty strong here in Delaware, and the history is pretty strong in Delaware as well. Okay, being a lifelong Delawarean, has the state changed a lot over the decades, or does it feel like it's held on to its character? This is a really good question. I would say I grew up in the southern part of Delaware. It is a peninsula in the southern part of Delaware, along with a little bit of Maryland and a little bit of Virginia. So I really thought it was remote, and I thought life wouldn't change there, and it has. As I said, especially in the coastal areas, people have moved in from other parts of the mid-Atlantic around us. And also with COVID, when people started to connect the way that we're connecting today, it enabled them to work from this peninsula and not have to, you know, go into a city office. And so the population has really grown. And there have been a lot of wonderful people coming in from other places that really continue to make Delaware a very multicultural area, which I think is pretty cool. Okay, final question. What is my favorite place in Delaware? This is really difficult. Wow. I am a homebody, so I'm right now in my home. This is a place that I really love to be. But I have to say that I do love to sort of get away from it all and go to one of our state parks, if not, you know, part of our national park. I do love to be around nature, and there is just an amazing array from cypress swamps in the southern part of the state to hilly areas to beaches that are all part of our state's park system. So I definitely love to take a moment just to reconnect with nature there. So I thank you very much. I do understand that, you know, the tour of the states is ongoing. And let's see, it looks like we want to thank you all for joining us this evening. The program is part of the American Center in Moscow's weekly speaker series continuing throughout 2026, 50 states. And we invite you to join us next Wednesday, July 15th at 8 p.m. Moscow time for the next event in the series, which will be on the great state of Alabama. Thank you very much.